Have you ever wondered why some people leave more impact when they disappear than others do when they're everywhere? Listen closely, because what I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you think you know about presence, power, and permanence. There's a silent law governing human attention that nobody talks about, a paradox so profound that once you master it, you'll never chase validation again. The law is simple. The less visible you become, the more unforgettable you are. But there's a catch. You can't just vanish. You must vanish correctly, strategically, devastatingly, because disappearing without strategy makes you invisible. Disappearing with intention makes you a legend. Machiavelli understood this in the shadows of Renaissance power plays. The most dangerous man in the room wasn't the one shouting orders. It was the one who appeared briefly, said little, then left, leaving everyone wondering what he knew that they didn't. That uncertainty, that gap in perception is where your power lives. So if you felt the weight of being too available, too present, too readable, then pay attention. What I'm about to show you isn't about hiding. It's about becoming so scarce that your absence becomes louder than anyone else's presence. This is the ghost protocol, the art of strategic disappearance. And once you master it, you don't need to be seen to be remembered. You just need to leave the room. Most people are terrified of silence. They can't stand being alone with themselves for more than 5 minutes without reaching for a screen, a notification, a distraction, anything to fill the void. Why? Because silence reveals. It shows you who you really are when no one is watching, when no one is validating, when no one cares. And for the weak, that's unbearable. But for you, silence is a weapon. It's the space where you rebuild, where you sharpen your mind, where you become dangerous. Because while everyone else is screaming for attention, you're doing something far more terrifying. You're learning to exist without needing it. Think about the people you can't forget, not the ones constantly posting, constantly talking, constantly performing. No, the ones you can't forget are the ones who came, changed something, then vanished. They didn't explain themselves, they didn't overstay. They left you with a question mark that never got answered, and that question mark haunts you. That's the power of strategic withdrawal. You don't fade into irrelevance. You become a mystery, and the human mind is obsessed with solving mysteries, especially when the mystery refuses to reveal itself. Here's what the weak will never understand. Availability destroys value. When you're always there, always responding, always accessible, people stop respecting you. Why? Because you've shown them you have nothing better to do. You've signaled that your time, your presence, your attention is cheap, and what's cheap gets discarded. But when you pull back, when you create space, when you make people wonder where you are and what you're doing, suddenly your value skyrockets. Not because you changed, but because you became rare, and rarity is power. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you disappeared? When was the last time you didn't respond immediately, didn't show up where you were expected, didn't explain yourself? If you can't remember, then you're not scarce, you're common, and common is forgettable. But if you're ready to change that, if you're ready to become the person they can't stop thinking about even when you're not there, then keep watching. Because what comes next will transform how you move, how you disappear, and how you return. The first phase of the ghost protocol is brutal. You must kill your need to be understood. Most people sabotage themselves before they even begin because they can't stand being misunderstood. Someone misinterprets them, and they rush to explain. Someone ignores them, and they panic. Someone forgets them, and they reappear desperate to be remembered. This is slavery, and until you break free from it, you will never be powerful, because the need to be understood is the leash they use to control you. Machiavelli knew this. He watched men in power crumble, not because they were defeated, but because they couldn't tolerate being misunderstood. They explained, they justified, they begged for clarity. And in doing so, they handed over their power. The truly dangerous man doesn't care if you understand him. He acts, and he lets the world scramble to interpret. He doesn't correct misconceptions. He uses them, because while everyone is busy guessing, he's 3 moves ahead. So here's your first rule. Never explain your absence. When you pull back, when you disappear, people will ask questions. Where did you go? Why aren't you responding? Are you okay? And your instinct will be to answer, to reassure, to explain. Don't. Let them sit in the discomfort. Let them wonder. Let them create their own narratives. Because the story they create in your absence will always be more powerful than anything you could tell them. You see, when you vanish without explanation, you force people to fill the void. And the human mind doesn't fill voids with boring explanations. It fills them with intrigue, with mystery, with narratives that elevate you beyond what you actually are. They'll assume you're busy building something massive. They'll assume you've moved on to bigger things. They'll assume you no longer need them. And all of that works in your favor, not because it's true, but because they believe it. But here's where most people fail. They disappear, then they ruin it by coming back too soon, too eager, too desperate to be relevant again. They can't handle the silence, so they break it prematurely, and when they do, they lose everything. Because now they've shown that their disappearance wasn't strategic. It was just a tantrum. A cry for attention disguised as distance. And people see through that immediately. The ghost protocol demands discipline. You don't vanish for a day or a week. You vanish until they feel it, until your absence creates a vacuum, until people start mentioning your name in conversations you're not part of, until they start wondering if they lost access to you permanently. That's when you know you've done it right. Not when they miss you, when they fear they've been cut off. And here's the key. While you're gone, you don't just sit in silence doing nothing. You use that time to evolve. You sharpen your skills, you refine your image, you build something they can't ignore. Because when you return, and you will return, you don't come back as the same person. You come back upgraded. You come back as someone they barely recognize, someone they underestimated, someone who clearly doesn't need them anymore. That's the shift. You didn't just disappear to play games. You disappeared to become unreachable. And when people realize that, when they see that you used your absence to ascend, they don't just respect you, they fear losing you again. And that fear, that uncertainty, is your leverage. You've trained them to value your presence by showing them the cost of your absence. So let me be clear, this isn't about being cold, it's about being calculated. It's about understanding that your attention, your time, your presence is the most valuable thing you have. And if you give it away freely, it becomes worthless. But if you make people earn it, if you make them question whether they still have access to you, then suddenly everything shifts. You're no longer chasing, you're being chased. And that's where the power lives. Now, let's go deeper, because vanishing is only half the equation. The real mastery is in how you reappear. And if you get this wrong, everything you've built collapses. Most people who disappear make one fatal mistake when they come back. They return explaining themselves. They apologize for being gone. They justify their absence. And in doing so, they destroy the entire illusion, because now they've admitted that their disappearance was something they felt guilty about, something they felt they needed to explain. And the moment you explain, you've lost. The ghost protocol doesn't allow for apologies. You don't return begging for forgiveness or trying to justify where you've been. You return as if nothing happened. You return calm, composed, unbothered. You don't owe anyone an explanation because you were never theirs to begin with. And that's the message your return must send. Not, I'm sorry I was gone, but I was exactly where I needed to be. When you reappear, you do it strategically. You don't flood back into every space you left. You choose one moment, one interaction, one precise re-entry point that makes the maximum impact. Maybe it's a message, maybe it's showing up somewhere unexpected, maybe it's a piece of work you release that makes it clear you weren't wasting time. Whatever it is, it has to communicate one thing: you leveled up. And here's the psychological warfare that comes with it. When you return stronger, sharper, more focused, people feel two things simultaneously. First, they feel relieved. You're back. Second, they feel threatened because you're not the same. You've evolved past the version of you they thought they knew. And now they're scrambling to figure out where they stand with you. Do they still have access? Are they still relevant to you? Or did you outgrow them while you were gone? That uncertainty is your weapon. You don't answer it directly. You let them guess. You let them try to re-earn your attention. You let them prove their value to you. And in doing so, you've completely flipped the dynamic. You're no longer the one seeking validation. You're the one granting access. And that's the ultimate power shift. Machiavelli said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But I'll take it. And further, it's better to be mysterious than either, because fear fades, love fades, but mystery lingers. It haunts, it obsesses. And when you master the art of strategic disappearance and calculated return, you become the person people can't stop thinking about. Not because you're everywhere, but because you're nowhere and everywhere at once. Here's what separates the ghost protocol from simple avoidance. Avoidance is running away. The ghost protocol is calculated withdrawal with a purpose. You're not hiding because you're weak. You're disappearing because you're building. And there's a massive difference. Weak men vanish because they can't handle pressure. Powerful men vanish because they're creating something the world isn't ready to see yet. Think about every great reveal in history. It was never done by someone who was constantly visible. It was done by someone who disappeared, worked in silence, and emerged with something undeniable. The artist who vanished for years and returned with a masterpiece. The entrepreneur who went dark and came back with an empire. The thinker who retreated from society and resurfaced with a philosophy that changed the world. They all understood the same principle: noise kills creation, silence births it. So while you're gone, while you're in the void, you're not passive. You're obsessive. You're working on the thing that will make your return impossible to ignore. You're refining your craft, your body, your mind, your strategy. You're becoming the version of yourself that doesn't need to announce anything because your presence does it for you. And when you finally step back into the light, you don't step back as someone seeking approval. You step back as someone whose existence alone shifts the room. But here's the part that requires the most discipline. You can't break character. You can't get lonely and reach out. You can't get bored and slip back into old patterns. You can't let your ego trick you into thinking you need to remind people you exist. Because the second you do that, you've lost. You've shown that you couldn't handle the silence. You've revealed that you still need them. And once they know that, they stop valuing your presence. The ghost protocol is a test of your own self-sufficiency. Can you be alone without feeling empty? Can you work without needing applause? Can you evolve without needing witnesses? If the answer is no, then you're not ready. You're still addicted to external validation. And until you break that addiction, you'll never be free. But if you can sit in the silence, if you can thrive in the absence of attention, if you can build in the dark without needing anyone to see, then you've crossed into a different realm. You've become self-sustaining, and that's when you become truly dangerous, because now your power doesn't come from others, it comes from within. You don't need their approval, their attention, their validation. You have something far more valuable, a clarity. You know who you are when no one is watching. You know what you're building when no one is cheering. And that self-knowledge, that internal alignment is what makes your return so devastating. Because you're not coming back to prove anything. You're coming back because you're ready to claim what's yours. Now let's talk about the return itself, because this is where legends are made or destroyed. Your reappearance must be seamless, effortless, cold. You don't announce it. You don't make a spectacle. You just show up, and your presence alone does the talking. Maybe it's in the way you carry yourself. Maybe it's in the work you've produced. Maybe it's in the way you look at people, not with hunger, not with need, but with quiet certainty. Whatever it is, it has to communicate that you didn't just survive your absence. You thrived in it. People will try to pull information out of you. They'll ask where you've been, what you've been doing, why you went dark. And here's your move. Give them nothing. Not out of spite, not out of arrogance, but because your story isn't theirs to consume. You offer vague, calm responses. I was working. I needed space. I'm exactly where I need to be. Short, final, non-negotiable. No elaboration, no justification, no invitation for follow-up questions. Why? Because mystery is your currency now. The less they know, the more they assume. And what they assume is always more powerful than what you could tell them. They'll assume you were building something massive. They'll assume you were healing, leveling up, moving in silence. And all of that elevates you in their mind without you having to say a word. You've become a story they tell themselves. And that story works for you even when you're not in the room. But here's the real test. When they try to re-establish the old dynamic, you don't let them. If they used to have unlimited access to you, that's over. If they used to be able to reach you any time, that's done. If they took your presence for granted, they don't get that privilege anymore. You've reset the terms, and now access to you is earned.